live alone. No roommates, no family, nobody else in my house. But for weeks now, every single night around 2 a.m., I've heard footsteps walking across my roof. Heavy, slow, deliberate footsteps, as if someone is pacing right above me. I thought it was an animal at first. They don't stop directly above your bedroom and stand there for hours. The worst part, one night I went outside to check, and the roof was empty. When I came back in, there were muddy footprints on my living room floor. It started a few months after I moved into the place. I had taken the job in town and finally saved enough for a small, cheap house on the edge of where the city met the country. It was quiet, and I liked that. I needed quiet. After a long day at work, I wanted a place where I could breathe and not worry about anyone else's mess. I did some basic repairs, put up curtains, planted a few tomato seedlings in the backyard. It felt like a fresh start. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. I fell into a routine. Work, quick run at lunch, dinner, TV, bed. The nights were calm, and even the loneliness felt bearable. Then one night, I woke up to a sound I didn't expect. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Old houses creak. But this was different. It was a dull, heavy thud, then another, right above my head. I froze. The sound was coming from the roof, directly over my bedroom. Step, dot, step, dot, step, dot, all. Slow, measured, like someone walking in boots. I lay there with the covers pulled up to my chin, listening to the sky move, convincing myself it was a branch or maybe a raccoon. I told myself to sleep. The footsteps stopped after a few minutes. I fell back asleep on a half-trust that morning would make me sane again. The second night, it happened again. Same time, same rhythm. Step, day, step, dot, that, dot. This time, I kept the lights on and sat up for a long while, waiting for the sound to come back. It did. The sound circled the house, slow and deliberate. I pictured someone walking the edges of my roof, looking down at my windows. But when I went outside with a flashlight and aimed it up, the shingles were empty. Nothing. The boards looked intact. No footprints on the gutters. No sign of anyone. Yet the sound kept me awake until dawn. After a week, I stopped pretending. I stopped telling myself it was the wind. I started keeping a notepad by the couch and scribbling down the times. Every night, right around the same hour. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but always in the night when everything should be quiet. It was like a clock had been set on top of my house, and whatever was pacing kept the same hours. Sleep broke me down. I work in a small office data entry, basic finance tasks. Nothing glamorous, but I needed that paycheck. On days I barely made it through, my boss asked if something was wrong. I said I was tired. I didn't tell him the truth. How do you tell someone you hear human feet pacing your roof while you sleep? I tried practical things. I called an exterminator to check for animals. He laughed politely and said my attic looked fine. I asked neighbors. Nobody had seen anyone on the roof. I installed a cheap camera under the eave, aimed at the roofline, hoping to catch movement. The camera recorded a few nights of empty shingles, and then a file that was corrupted the night the footsteps were loudest. Corrupt files and blinking timestamps made me feel foolish and haunted at the same time. The sound, though, kept coming. Sometimes it felt like the footsteps were testing me. They would stop over the kitchen for a while, then move to the center of the house, then climb toward my bedroom and linger. Once, I heard what sounded like whispering, muffled and close to the roof vents. It could have been the wind playing tricks with old pipes, but the whispering had a cadence, like two voices talking low and deliberate. I would hold my breath until my lungs hurt, waiting to hear the next syllable. One night, I waited too long. I had a small stovetop repair I'd been meaning to do, and I dozed off on the couch with the TV on. At around 2 in the morning, the footsteps began louder than ever. This time they stopped directly above my living room. I heard something scrape the tiles on the roof. Then the back door handle rattled. I jumped up and walked to the door slowly, phone in my hand. I peered through the peephole. No one outside. The yard was empty. I stepped out into the night and felt the cool air hit me. I circled the house, calling out like an idiot. "Hello? Who's there?" My voice small against the trees. No answer. Nothing. The back door kicked closed under my feet, and I walked back in, half relieved and half angry, convinced I had imagined it all. And then I saw the prints. There, on the living room carpet near the door, were footprints. Not faint, not animal prints. Clear, muddy boot prints, as if someone had walked across the roof with big boots, and then stepped down onto my tiles and across my rug. The mud had smudged a little when the next step was dragged. The pattern was weird, not like any shoe I recognized. It had long, thin grooves, like claw marks pressed into mud. My heart hammered. I backed away slowly, my legs shaking until I sat down on the couch. I called the police. They came quickly for the first call. 2 officers, polite and practical, flashlights and notebooks. They walked through the house and looked up at the roof. They took photos of the prints. They felt the mud, tested it between gloved fingers. They found no other signs, no forced entry, no tools, no footprints. Outside that matched what was inside. They suggested perhaps someone had walked along the gutter and then dropped down onto the porch. Someone could have been looking to break in, one said, but there's no sign of forced entry here. They left me with a card and a recommendation to call again if anything else happened. I wanted to believe that explanation. I taped the living room closed with caution tape, the way TV shows do, and slept in the car that night. I couldn't stand the idea of a stranger slipping inside my home, placing muddy boots on my floor, leaving without a trace. But that night, even the car felt unsafe. I kept waking and listening to the roof, as if the house might come to life and reveal a secret. After the police visit, things changed. The footsteps grew bolder. They came earlier or later, sometimes in the afternoon, when the house should have been empty and quiet. Once, I left for a shift and returned to find small, damp prints on the kitchen counter, tiny, almost child-sized grooves, like the underside of on the underside of something unnatural. I set up more cameras, covered windows, called friends, and yet the prints kept appearing in places that made no sense. The bathtub, the pantry floor, across the top of a chair. I was losing sleep, losing time with market research I tried to do online to earn some extra cash, losing my sense of safety. I started thinking about moving, small investments, selling the house and buying something in a busier area. The rational part of me worked out numbers, selling price, taxes, cost of moving. But the part of me that counted footsteps at night had already decided. I needed to leave before those steps took another step inside me. A week before I put the house on the market, I was home alone having a late supper. It had been raining all day, and the floor was slick. I had my back to the window and I felt a cold breath across my neck. Something sat on the couch behind me. I turned slowly. The couch was empty. I don't mean no one there. There was a clear impression on the cushion, as if the shape of a person had just risen, a pressed outline in the fabric. I took a picture with my phone, hands trembling. The photo showed the sunken outline, and at the edge of the imprint there were faint, muddy smears. I dumped my phone and ran to the front door, grabbing keys, wallet, everything. I threw open the door and bolted to my car. I drove into the night and didn't stop until morning, when I pulled into a friend's driveway and slept on their couch until the sun came up. I called the landlord and told him I had to move out. He was sympathetic but skeptical. Houses settle, you know. Old pipes, animals, he said. We can do an inspection. He sent an inspector who checked the eaves, the attic, the gutters. Nothing. Structurally, the house was solid, but when he walked through the living room, he went quiet at the prints. He took a photograph, then another. He locked the house and told me he would keep it secure until I figured out what to do. 2 nights before my move, I returned to the house with the landlord and a close friend. We stood in the living room, looking at the prints under the weak porch light. It felt wrong to be back. The house smelled like wet earth and something older. We waited. Nothing happened at first. Then at 2:07 a.m. on the old clock by the mantel, the roof sounded like someone had dropped a heavy log and dragged it across shingles. Died. Step, died all. Step, died. The 3 of us froze. My friend swore the same thing I had heard. The sound wasn't like someone walking on a roof. It was methodical. Slow, like marching. The landlord whispered, "No one's up there." We went outside together, flashlights cutting across the roof. Nothing. The camera we had set up showed a black frame and then one single image where the roof line looked blurred and wrong, like a heat ripple. No person. Yet the photograph had an imprint, a faint pale smear where the silhouette of a figure might have been. I felt cold fingers close around my spine. After that night, I didn't sleep in that house again. I moved in with a cousin for a while and started the process of selling. People asked questions about the prints, the police report. Real estate agents asked why I wanted to leave. I answered with the usual, privacy, change of scenery, and kept the confession to myself. Who would believe footsteps on a roof that leave no miner's boots or ladder marks? How do you sell a home with a story like that? Months have passed since I moved. I bought a small flat in the city, something with neighbors on both sides, because the idea of isolation made me sweat. The flat is noisier, the trains rumble past, and the pipes clap at night. But it is full of life and voices that drown out the memory of step. I sleep deeper now. The city hum helps. But sometimes when the house is quiet and the city sleeps, I hear a faint echo in my head. Step, step, like a memory playing on repeat. I find myself checking the ceiling, imagining a shadow passing across the roof. I still wake up sometimes with my heart pounding as if someone walked across the tiles last night. I still catch myself looking up when I hear rain, like the sound could mask something larger. The police closed their file. The inspector wrote a clean structural report. Neighbors shrugged and said houses creak. My friends called me superstitious or joked that I was moonlighting as a horror writer. But I remember the mud on the living room carpet and the imprint on the couch cushion, and the way the steps had a rhythm like a human heart. I remember the whispering over the vents that sounded like 2 voices deciding something. I remember the imprint in the camera photo that looked like a smear of steam in a cold room. If there's any meaning at all in what happened to me, it is this. The world is not always kind, and the quiet can hide things you don't want to learn are true. If you ever hear heavy footsteps on your roof and you live alone, don't assume it's just the weather. Trust your gut. Document everything. Call people who can help. And if you can, move toward the light where other people are. Because sometimes safety is just the sound of someone else's house being alive at night. I still look over my shoulder. I still check the ceiling when the night gets very quiet. But I no longer sleep under the same roof where those footsteps once walked. Sometimes that knowledge is a small comfort. Sometimes it is a curse. Either way, I am not willing to find out what comes next if I can help it. Step, step, step,